Welcome to the deep dive. It's great to have you with us today. We're going to be plunging into some information that honestly has pretty significant implications for anyone involved in software development and probably beyond. Before we really get started, though, just a quick word about our sponsor. This deep dive is sponsored by Stonefly. Now, Stonefly are leaders in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. And in today's world, protecting your data from threats like ransomware, well, it's absolutely critical. Stonefly actually specializes in providing secure, ransomware-proof storage. That includes things like air-gapped and immutable storage options, really robust stuff. So if solid data protection is a priority for your organization, you should reach out to them. It's sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo. Okay, so let's unpack this. Today, we are really diving deep into a series of very recent cyber incidents. And these aren't just minor glitches. These events have sent pretty significant tremors through the software development community. They've mainly been targeting the places developers get their code from, the popular package ecosystems.
That's exactly right. And what's really notable about the information we're looking at here isn't just, that these incidents happened, but which components were involved. These attacks, they're not hitting some obscure, rarely used libraries. No, they're impacting really widely used packages, components that get millions of downloads. This really represents what security analysts are calling a significant escalation in supply chain attacks. It's like poisoning the well that developers rely on every day. And it poses very real risks to developers themselves, to the software they're building, and ultimately to the organizations they work for. So yeah, we're going to go through the details, try to understand exactly what happened, how the attackers actually pulled this off, and maybe most importantly, what all of this means for you listening.
Absolutely. Think of us as your guides through what can seem like pretty dense information. We want to pull out the really crucial points, help you see the connections, and understand the potential impact, without getting totally bogged down in overly technical jargon. So, starting point then. It seems like a central event, one that really stands out, is this significant compromise affecting a whole bunch of packages used in React Native development, specifically within the GlueStack ecosystem, right, on NPM.
Yes, exactly. That incident is a really crucial place to start because of, well, its scale and the specific techniques the attackers used. It was detected very, very recently on the evening of June 6th, 2025. And what's particularly concerning, as was noted, is that the activity seemed to be ongoing when it was first reported. The attackers didn't just hit one or two packages. They compromised, get this, 16 or 17 popular packages, apparently all at once. The sheer reach is just immense. These packages, collectively, they see over 1 million downloads every single week.
Wow, okay. Over 1 million downloads weekly. That's a staggering potential user base right there. Can you give us a few examples? Which packages are we talking about specifically?
Sure. The list includes things like at React Native Area Focus, at GlueStack Utils, at React Native Area Utils, at React Native Area Overlays, at React Native Area Interactions, and yeah, several others from that widely used GlueStack collection. And just to give you a sense of the individual impact, that first one at React Native Area Focus, that package alone accounts for about 100,000 of those weekly downloads. These are pretty foundational components for building UIs in React Native.
Okay, 100,000 for just one. So the big question then is how? How did they manage to compromise so many popular packages seemingly all at the same time? Was it some kind of big vulnerability in NPM itself?
Well, interestingly, the mechanism described points to something perhaps less complex at its root, but incredibly effective nonetheless: compromised credentials. The analysis seems to indicate the attackers got their initial access by taking control of a public access token. And this token belonged to an authorized package maintainer. The really critical detail here, the one that's highlighted in the findings, is that this specific access token wasn't protected by two-factor authentication. No 2FA.
Ah, the usual suspect.
Exactly. That made it a significantly weaker point for attackers to target and, well, ultimately compromise. And once they had that token, it granted them unauthorized publishing rights across all the packages managed by that maintainer's account.
It just keeps coming up, doesn't it? That lack of 2FA being the Achilles heel. So, okay, they've got access. What did they actually put into these packages? What was the malicious payload?
They injected a remote access trojan, a RAT. And the analysis confirms this wasn't like a brand new piece of malware they cooked up from scratch. It's identified as being related to malware seen in a previous attack just the month before, in May 2025. That one also targeted an NPM package. So it suggests the attackers are iterating, refining their tools and campaigns over time.
Okay, so they're reusing and tweaking their malware. But how did they hide? I mean, developers look at code, right? Sometimes. How did they slip this RA past even a quick inspection?
Yeah, this part is quite clever, actually. They used a pretty sophisticated, and I'd say cunning obfuscation technique, whitespace manipulation. The material explains how they basically padded the lines containing the malicious code with hundreds, maybe even thousands of spaces.
Just spaces.
Just spaces, pushing the actual malicious code way off to the right, far off the screen in most standard code editors. You might find the real code starting way over on, say, line 46, which was noted in some cases, or sometimes just appended to the very end of the file long after all the legitimate code seems to finish. The effect is, when someone opens the file in their editor or does a quick visual scan, they scroll through the legitimate code, maybe check the first 80 or 100 characters of each line, and they completely miss the bad stuff hidden way off to the side or way down below. It's just not visible on their screen.
That is incredibly sneaky. It totally leverages how people actually review code day to day. You don't usually scroll horizontally for thousands of characters.
Exactly. It's a brilliant kind of low-tech way to bypass not just manual review, but potentially even some basic automated static analysis tools that might not be configured to handle such excessive line padding correctly.
Okay, so it's hidden using whitespace. Now, let's say a developer, or maybe more likely their automated build system in CI/CD, pulls in one of these compromise packages, and this hidden code runs. What does the RET actually do? What powers does it give the attackers?
Well, this particular RAT is described as having a pretty substantial set of capabilities. It's really designed for persistence and control. One of its first steps often is to check if certain dependencies it needs are present. Specifically, it looks for Axios and socket.io-client.
Okay, why those two?
Well, Axios is a really common library for making HTTP requests network calls. And socket.io-client is used for establishing persistent, real-time, two-way connections, like WebSockets. Both are essential tools if you're building an array that needs to communicate back to its controllers and potentially transfer data. So if they aren't already installed, it tries to automatically install them.
Got it. So it sets itself up with the tools it needs to phone home. How does it make sure it sticks around, survives a reboot?
Persistence is definitely a key objective here. The analysis details a specific method they use, particularly on Windows systems. The malware writes its files to a specific kind of unusual location. %locale APA data % programs Python 3127.
Python 3127, that sounds almost legitimate.
Exactly. It's designed to look like a real Python installation path, probably to help it blend in and avoid suspicion. But the really critical part is how it leverages this location for Windows path hijacking. The system's path environment variable, right? It tells Windows where to find executable programs when you type a command.
Yeah.
So what this malware does is it adds to the beginning its fake Python path, %locale Python 3127 to the system's path variable, the result. Whenever a user or another process tries to run Python, or maybe the Python package installer kip, Windows looks in that fake directory first, and it finds and runs the attacker's malicious binaries instead of the legitimate Python tools.
Whoa. So it intercepts commands for Python itself.
Potentially, yes. It's a really powerful persistence technique because it can survive reboots, and it makes cleaning up the infection much harder than just deleting a single file.
Yeah.
You have to find and fix the modified path variable too.
Okay, path hijacking is definitely a direct route to maintaining control. What kind of information does this RAT gather initially about the system it's landed on?
It performs some basic system fingerprinting right away. It collects essential details about the host environment, things like the operating system version, the computer's host name, the username of the account that's running the compromised code, the version of Node.js installed, and the exact file path where the infected process was executed from. All this data gets sent back to the attackers. It gives them immediate context about the system they've just breached. Is it a developer machine, a server, what kind of OS? And after gathering that initial recon, the RIT establishes communication with its command and control servers, the C2 servers.
Right, the mothership.
Pretty much. The analysis identifies a couple of primary C2 IP addresses that were being used, 136.0.9.8 and 85.239.62.36. But what's interesting here is their choice of communication ports. They weren't using standard web ports like 80 or 443. They were using non-standard ports, specifically mentioning 3306 and 27017.
3306. That's usually MySQL, isn't it? And 27017 is MongoDB.
Exactly. That's almost certainly a deliberate tactic. By using ports commonly associated with legitimate database traffic, the malware's C2 communication can potentially blend in better with normal network activity. It's less likely to be immediately flagged by basic network firewalls or monitoring systems that might be looking for traffic on typical malware ports. The analysis also mentions that the specific C2 server the RAT connects to is actually determined by a hard-coded version tag within the malware itself. This probably helps the attackers manage different versions of their RT or maybe separate distinct attack campaigns.
Campaign management.
Yeah. And one more thing on the C2, the attackers were apparently actively rotating their C2 infrastructure, switching IP addresses. This makes it much harder for security teams to simply block them by blacklisting a fixed set of IPs. They have to keep adapting.
Okay, so it's persistent, it gathers info, it phones home using sneaky ports, and the attackers are actively managing their infrastructure. So once they have that connection established, what commands can they actually send? What can they do on the compromised system?
The RAT provides a pretty significant command interface to the attackers. It gives them extensive control. There's an synfo command, for instance, which pulls back even more detailed system metadata than the initial fingerprinting. Things like internal payload versions, more granular OS details, specific runtime versions, script paths, even how long the malware has been running on the system. Then there's SIP. That command makes the RAT query an external service, like ipapi.com, to find out the victim's public IP address, and then it sends that information back to the C2. Beyond just gathering information, though, they get considerable control over the file system.
Like browsing files.
More than browsing. They can change directories. They can reset their working directory back to where the script originally started, stare, or they can force a change to any arbitrary path they specify, ssfcd.path. And crucially, they can upload files from the victim system back to themselves. There's a command for uploading single files, cpf.ftt, and another for uploading entire directories, recursively, ccpds, tiras. They even included a command, stop, to interrupt an upload if needed.
Uploading files in entire directories.
Yeah.
That's direct data theft right there. What about actually running things on the system, executing commands?
Yes, and this is arguably the most critical capability detailed in the analysis. The RAT includes functionality to execute arbitrary shell commands.
Wow.
It uses the standard Node.js function childprocess.exec. This essentially gives the attacker a remote command prompt on the compromised machine. Anything a legitimate user could type into the command line on that system, the attacker can now execute remotely through the RAT. This provides incredibly broad control.
So they could install more malware.
Absolutely. Install more malware, delete files, access system resources, change configurations, maybe even use built-in system tools like netstat or ping to scan the local network and look for other machines to target.
Lateral movement.
Exactly. The analysis also explicitly mentions support for recursive directory traversal, meaning it can systematically navigate through all folders and subfolders and file exfiltration using both standard HTTP PEP OST requests and the persistent socket.io channel. So they have redundant ways to steal data.
Okay, executing arbitrary commands is basically game over for that system's security. Does the malware try anything else to kind of dig itself in deeper?
Yes, there was one more thing noted. The analysis mentioned that the malware attempts to silently modify the host system's node module paths. The apparent goal here seems to be making the infection even more deeply embedded within the development environment itself. This could potentially increase its persistence further, or maybe make it harder to completely remove just by uninstalling the specific affected package or deleting its initial files.
Man, that is a thorough and frankly pretty scary picture of what this RA can do. So how did people react once this got discovered? The security researchers, the package maintainers?
Right. So according to the information we have, the initial discovery was made by a security firm called Aikido Security. They were the ones who spotted the suspicious packages. They did the right thing, reported them to NPM, the package registry, and they also attempted to contact the package maintainers directly. However, the timing, as mentioned, was late on a Friday evening. That probably contributed to a bit of a delay in the maintainers being able to respond immediately. People aren't always monitoring things 24/7, especially in open source projects.
Understandable, but still unfortunate timing for an attack.
Definitely. But eventually, the GlueStack maintainers did respond and later confirmed the root cause. It was indeed a compromised public access token, just as the analysis suspected, and crucially, one without 2FA.
Okay, so once it was confirmed, what did they actually do to fix it?
They took several important steps pretty quickly. First, they immediately revoked that compromised access token, cut off the attacker's publishing access. Then, on the NPM registry itself, they deprecated all the affected package versions. Now, they couldn't just unpublish them entirely because other legitimate packages might depend on those specific versions. Unpublishing can break things badly downstream.
Right, the dependency hill problem.
Exactly. So instead, they updated the latest tag for these packages to point back to known, safe, older versions. This means anyone doing a fresh install or updating using NPM install package at latest would automatically get a clean version going forward. And beyond just fixing this specific incident, they also took some broader security improvement steps, which is good to see. They revoked GitHub access for non-essential contributors, tightening up who can touch the code. And, importantly, they enabled two-factor authentication for both publishing new packages to NPM and for accessing their GitHub repositories.
Good. Locking the doors after the horse has bolted, maybe, but necessary steps.
Absolutely necessary to prevent it from happening again the same way. Now, it's also important to mention the maintainer's perspective on the potential impact as it was reported. They initially suggested that because React Native ARA is mainly a front-end library code that runs in the user's browser or app, not typically during the build process after installation, they felt the likelihood of the malicious code actually executing on user systems was, and I quote, extremely low to none. Their assessment, based on the library's intended use case, was that no system-level compromises are expected.
Okay, I hear that based on the intended use, but listening to you describe the RIIT's capabilities, arbitrary command execution, persistence, data theft, path hijacking the potential impact, sounds, well, a lot more severe than extremely low to none. What's the real risk here for a developer or a company that might have pulled in one of these bad versions, even accidentally?
And that's the absolutely critical nuance, isn't it? The maintainers might be perfectly correct about the typical usage pattern of their library, not involving post-install script execution. But the malicious payload is still there in the downloaded package files. Any system, whether it's a developer's laptop, a shared build server, a CI/CD pipeline runner, any system that downloaded or updated to one of those affected versions is potentially infected. The malware doesn't necessarily need the React Native application itself to trigger it. It could potentially execute during the package installation process itself. Some packages run install scripts, or it could just lie dormant, waiting for the attacker to activate it remotely via that C2 connection we talked about.
Right. The code is on the disk, waiting.
Exactly. And the potential consequences, if it does execute, are really significant and far-reaching. Credential theft is a huge one. With the ability to run commands and browse the file system, that RA could easily find and steal API keys stored in config files, environment variables, maybe SSH keys, browser cookies, sensitive documents, you name it. And stealing credentials directly enables lateral movement. If the compromised machine is a developer's workstation connected to a corporate network, those stolen credentials could be used to access other systems, databases, code repositories.
Spreading the infection.
Precisely. And the attackers could easily use their foothold to download and install more malware, maybe something even worse, like ransomware. Plus, those persistence mechanisms, especially that Windows path hijacking trick, that means just running npm update to get the clean version of the package doesn't necessarily fix the problem. The RAT could still be lurking on the system, running silently in the background. Other potential impacts that were mentioned: using the compromised machines as part of a botnet for things like illicit cryptocurrency mining, or launching distributed denial of service, DDoS attacks, against other targets, flooding them with traffic from the victim's network, and, of course, the ongoing risk of sensitive data theft.
Okay, so the takeaway is, regardless of how the library is supposed to be used, downloading an infected version introduces a very serious risk because of what the malware can do. So what's the actionable advice? What should developers, IT teams, security folks be doing right now if they use any GlueStack components or even just suspect they might have been exposed?
Yeah, the advice coming out of the analysis is pretty clear and definitely urgent. First things first, audit your environments immediately. Developers and security teams need to check their dependency log files. That's your package-lock.json if you use NPM, or yarn.lock if you use Yarn. Look carefully through those files to see if any of the known compromised versions of those 16 or 17 packages were ever installed in any of your projects, past or present.
So identify exposure first.
Yes. And if you find any compromised versions listed, you need to update those specific packages to the known, safe, non-deprecated versions immediately. And crucially, make sure your log file gets updated too, so you don't accidentally reinstall the bad version later. But, and this is critical, updating the package isn't enough because of the persistence risk. You have to assume that any system where a compromised version was downloaded might be infected.
Treat it as potentially compromised.
Exactly. So investigate the systems themselves. Block outbound network traffic from your network to those specific C2 IP addresses, 136.0.9.8, 85.239.62.36, and ports 3306, 27016 that were identified. That cuts off the malware's communication channel if it's active. Then, you need to scan or manually inspect systems, especially Windows machines, for the specific signs of persistence. Look for that weird Python 3127 directory under %, app data sense % programs. Check the system path variable for any suspicious entries pointing there. Look for any unusual running processes or network connections that you can't explain. And probably the most important point, any system that you find evidence of compromise on or even strongly suspect might have been compromised by this RAT, you must treat it as fully untrusted. Assume the attackers had complete control. Which means a full incident response. That likely involves completely re-imaging the system, wiping it clean, and reinstalling the operating system and applications from scratch to be absolutely sure the malware is gone. And, critically, rotating all credentials. That means passwords, API keys, SSH keys, any secrets that were stored on or accessed from that compromised machine. Because you have to assume the attackers might have stolen them.
Wow. Okay. That's a significant response effort, but clearly necessary given the capabilities. That's a really thorough look at that React Native incident. But as you hinted at earlier, this wasn't just a one-off, was it? The information suggests this supply chain compromise stuff is a wider trend, affecting multiple ecosystems.
That's absolutely crucial to understand, yes. While the React Native GlueStack incident got a lot of headlines because of its scale and the popularity of the packages, the reality is that similar malicious activities are popping up all over the place. These supply chain attacks aren't just an NPM or JavaScript problem. We're seeing equivalent tactics targeting users of other package managers, like PyPI for the Python language. And the attack vectors even extend beyond package managers entirely into things like malicious browser extensions or straight-up social engineering campaigns.
Okay, so let's broaden out. Beyond the RAT we just discussed, what else did researchers find lurking in the NPM ecosystem? Any different types of malware?
Yes, the analysis highlighted some other malicious packages found on NPM that had different goals. Two notable examples were packages named Express Apasync and System Health Sync API. And interestingly, they appeared to be published by the same account, suggesting a coordinated effort.
Okay, and what did these ones do? Were they RATs too?
No, these were different. Their primary function seemed to be, well, wiping data. They acted as wipers. The simpler one, Express Apasync, was pretty blunt. If it receives a specific HTTP request containing a hard-coded key, acting like a trigger, it would just execute the shell command rmm-rf.
Ouch, the delete everything recursively command.
Exactly. On Linux or macOS systems, that command just starts deleting everything it can in the current directory and all subdirectories without any confirmation prompts. It's designed for rapid mass deletion, essentially wiping out whatever project or data was in the directory where the compromised package was running.
Just destruction. No obvious way for the attacker to make money from that.
Right. It's strange. This apparent shift towards pure system sabotage, just destroying data rather than trying to steal it for ransom, or using the system for crypto mining, is highlighted as an unusual and quite concerning development. It doesn't fit the typical financially motivated cybercrime profile. It might suggest different motivations, maybe purely disruption or causing damage for other reasons.
That is unsettling. What about the other one, System Health Sync API? Was it just a wiper too?
That one was a bit more sophisticated. It was actually both an information stealer and a wiper. For the wiping part, it was smarter. It adapted its deletion command based on the operating system it found itself on. For Linux macOS, it used the same REZ-RF, but for Windows, it used the equivalent command REECQ, which also recursively deletes the current directory without prompting. Same destructive outcome, just tailored to the OS.
Okay, adaptive wiping, how did it steal information?
This is where it got particularly sneaky. It used outbound email, specifically SMTP, as its data exfiltration channel. The code was designed to gather certain information, including potentially sensitive backend URLs configured in the application it was part of. Then it would attempt to email that stolen data to a specific Gmail address. And get this, the package actually contained the hard-coded SMTP credentials needed to send the email, a username, auth@corehomes.in, and a password that was just base64 encoded.
Base64, that's barely obfuscation.
Not really security, no. More like a simple way to hide it from casual glances. But using outbound email for exfiltration is clever because many firewalls are configured to allow standard SMTP traffic out. Legitimate applications send email, right? So this malicious traffic might just blend in and bypass network security controls that are focused on blocking weird ports or protocols. And these wiper stealer packages were designed to be triggered by accessing specific HTTP endpoints they created within the compromised application, like system health or sysmaintenance. So if the application was running and exposed to the network, the attacker could potentially trigger the wipe or data theft remotely.
Wow.
Okay, wipers and data theft via email, definitely different angles. What about outside of Node.js? You mentioned PyPI, the Python repository. What was happening there?
Yes, PyPI has definitely seen its share of malicious activity too. The material highlighted one specific package called a MAD213. Now, this package presented itself as an Instagram growth tool, which immediately tells you who it's targeting social media users, maybe people looking for shortcuts to get more followers.
Always a tempting target. Did people fall for it?
Apparently, yes. It was reportedly downloaded thousands of times, which suggests their social engineering or promotion, wherever they advertised it, was reasonably successful.
And once someone installed and ran this fake Instagram tool, what did it actually do?
Its main job was credential harvesting, plain and simple. When a user typed their Instagram username and password into the tool, the package would just capture those credentials. But here's where it gets interesting. The analysis found that it didn't just send the stolen logins to one place. It forwarded them to no fewer than 10 different third-party bot services simultaneously.
10 different places? Wow.
It strongly suggests a credential laundering or distribution operation. The attacker likely had arrangements with these bot services, maybe to quickly test the validity of the stolen credentials across many platforms, or perhaps to immediately sell them off through automated channels before the victim realized they'd been compromised and changed their password. Spread the risk, maximize the potential return quickly. The attackers behind this PyPI package also used a couple of other clever tricks. They used base 64 encoding again, just like the NPM wiper, to slightly obfuscate parts of their malicious code. And they built in a remote kill switch. This was quite neat. The malware would only actually execute its credential-stealing payload if it could successfully fetch a specific text file from a URL hosted on Netlify, a popular web hosting service. And inside that text file, it had to find a specific string. It made 213.
So the attacker could turn it on and off remotely.
It's exactly. By simply changing the content of that text file on Netlify, they could control whether the malware active in the wild would run or not. They could enable it only when they wanted, maybe to avoid detection during certain periods, or disable all copies instantly if they felt compromised. It gives them very granular remote control over their operation. And adding another layer of deception, the package creator actually included a so-called safety tip in the documentation. It advised users to use a fake Instagram account with the tool.
That sounds helpful.
Right. It sounds like responsible advice. But in reality, it was likely just a psychological trick. It made users feel safer, lowering their guard, while they were still potentially handing over credentials to some account. Maybe it wasn't their main account, but it could still be a valuable secondary account, a test account, or one they use for other things. It just manipulated the user's perception of risk. And it turned out the same user account on PyPI that published a MAD213 was linked to a whole bunch of other malicious packages too. Some targeted credentials for other major platforms, Facebook, Gmail, Twitter, even the Russian social network VK. Others were apparently designed just to launch DDoS attacks from the victim's machine. So, a pretty prolific bad actor.
That's quite a portfolio of malicious activity from just one source on PyPI. It really shows the breadth of these attacks. What about vectors completely outside package managers? Did the analysis touch on anything like that?
It did, yes. It covered attacks that go straight for the end user, using social engineering and browser tricks, bypassing the developer supply chain altogether in a sense. One example given was a campaign dubbed ClickFix. This one specifically targeted macOS users. How? By using typo-squatting domains.
Ah, the slightly misspelled website names.
Exactly. Setting up domains that look very similar to legitimate popular websites, hoping to catch users who make a typo when entering a URL. One instance mentioned apparently mimicked the Spectrum website.
Okay, so a macOS user mistypes, say, spectrum.com instead of spectrum.com, and lands on this fake site. What happens then?
When the user hits one of these fake sites, they're presented with something designed to look like a cat key CHA challenge. You know, the prove you're human tests. Click the traffic lights, type the wavy letters.
Yeah, it does.
But of course, it's a fake CHA. The user inevitably fails it. Then, the site displays instructions. It tells the user they need to copy a piece of code, a shell script that's provided right there on the web page, and then paste it into their macOS terminal application and run it.
Just copy this random code from a website and run it in your terminal. That sounds like terrible advice.
It is. But people can be tricked, especially if they're frustrated or think it's a necessary step to access the site. If the user actually follows these instructions, the copied shell script executes, and its main purpose is to immediately prompt the user for their macOS system password. If the user enters it, the script then downloads and installs a known piece of malware called the Atomic macOS Stealer, or AMOS.
Amos. Sounds bad. What does it do?
As the name suggests, its primary goal is stealing credentials stored on the Mac browser, passwords, keychain items, crypto wallets, system information. It might also download and execute other malicious binaries. The material notes that this Amos malware is particularly persistent in trying to get that system password. It will apparently keep popping up dialog boxes asking for the password until the user finally gives in. It even includes logic to try and detect the specific version of macOS running so it can customize the password prompt to look more legitimate and convincing. Pretty much. Although, interestingly, the analysis of this particular ClickFix campaign using Amos did mention some signs that suggested the implementation was maybe a bit sloppy or put together hastily, but the underlying technique is still dangerous.
Okay, so we've covered quite a range now. We've seen RATs hidden in popular NPM packages using whitespace tricks and credential theft. We've seen wipers in NPM, some stealing data via SMTP. We've seen credential harvesters on PyPI using remote kill switches and deceptive safety tips. And now social engineering campaigns tricking macOS users into running scripts via fake CAPI-TCAs on typo-squatted domains. Seeing all these diverse attacks, different platforms, different malware types, different techniques, what's the bigger picture here? What are the common threads, the patterns? And why are these supply chain attacks in particular proving so effective right now?
Yeah, stepping back, the pattern across all these incidents is pretty clear, and it's concerning. Attackers are systematically exploiting the fundamental trust that underpins our entire software ecosystem. We trust the packages we download from repositories like NPM and PyPI. We trust the components we build our applications with. And attackers are abusing that trust. They're using similar foundational tactics again and again. Obfuscation is key, whether it's the clever whitespace padding, simple base64 encoding, or hiding logic behind remotely fetched files. The goal is to evade detection by both humans and automated tools. Persistence is another major theme. They aren't content with just running once. They want to stay on the system. We saw the Windows path hijacking, attempts to modify node module paths, techniques designed to ensure their malware survives reboots, and simple cleanup attempts. And the payloads are diverse, tailored to the opportunity. We've seen the comprehensive RATs aiming for full system control and data exfiltration. We've seen the wipers focus purely on disruption and destruction. And we've seen the more targeted credential harvesters going after specific online accounts or system access credentials. They're using the right tool for the job, so to speak.
And why are they so effective, especially the ones targeting package managers?
It really comes down to leverage. Supply chain attacks offer incredible leverage. Think about it. By compromising just one popular software component, like one of those glue stack packages, with hundreds of thousands of weekly downloads, an attacker can potentially infect a massive number of downstream users almost instantly. Developers pull these packages into their projects, build servers pull them, CI/CD pipelines pull them. The infection spreads automatically through the normal development workflow. Modern software development relies heavily on reusing code from third-party packages and open-source libraries. It's how we build things so quickly. But the flip side is that it's become practically impossible for most development teams or organizations to perform a thorough security audit of every single line of code and every dependency they use, especially when you consider dependencies of dependencies going down multiple levels.
That's just too much code.
Exactly. And those automated build processes in CI/CD environments, while they're great for efficiency, they can also act as super spreaders for these infections if they automatically pull in a compromised package version without adequate security checks or vulnerability scanning in place.
It really sounds like a massive challenge for everyone involved. You've got the open source maintainers, often volunteers, trying to secure widely used projects. You've got developers just trying to build features quickly. And you've got security teams trying to protect the organization from threats hidden deep inside the software stack. How do you even start to manage this risk effectively?
It is a monumental challenge, and there are no easy answers. The GlueStack incident perfectly illustrates the burden on maintainers managing popular projects, often with limited resources, and having to deal with security crises that can happen at any time, like a Friday evening. For organizations using this software, it really has to be about layered defenses. How do you vet dependencies before they even get into your code base? How do you detect a compromise quickly if a malicious package does slip through? What's your incident response plan when it happens? And the analysis also draws a really important connection between the credential theft aspect we saw in several of these attacks, the RAT grabbing system secrets, the PyPI malware stealing logins, and a broader, increasingly critical area of modern security risk. This is where the concepts of shadow AI and perhaps more tangibly non-human identity or NHI risk come into play.
Shadow AI and NHI risk. Okay, tell me more. How does that connect to a RAT stealing an API key from a developer's machine?
Right. Think about how complex modern IT environments are. It's not just human users logging in anymore. We have a massive and rapidly growing number of automated systems doing things. These are service accounts that run background processes, bots that perform automated tasks, scripts triggered by schedulers, API keys used by applications to talk to each other, and increasingly, AI agents or developer tools like GitHub Copilot interacting with systems in code. All these are effectively non-human identities, and these NHIs often hold the keys to the kingdom. They manage incredibly sensitive secrets like API keys for cloud platforms, database credentials, access tokens for critical internal services.
Okay, I see where you're going.
So, the analysis points out that if an attacker successfully steals credentials using a RAT that infected a developer's machine, or maybe a build server, those stolen credentials might not just give them access to that one user's account. They could potentially be the keys to compromise these powerful NHIs. And the risk gets amplified because these NHIs often don't have the same level of security scrutiny applied to them as human accounts. Maybe their credentials, like API keys, aren't rotated regularly. Maybe they have overly broad permissions, way more access than they actually need. Maybe there's no clear process for securely decommissioning them when they're no longer required. They become these powerful, potentially vulnerable identities lurking in the system. The analysis even specifically mentioned how tools like AI Copilot, while amazing for productivity, can inadvertently increase the risk of developers accidentally leaking secrets, like API keys, into their code, which might then get committed to platforms like GitHub if they're not careful. This just adds another layer to the complex web of risk that developers and organizations are navigating.
So, a supply chain attack leading to credential theft could be the entry point to compromising these powerful, often less monitored automated identities. That's a really chilling connection.
It really is. It means the blast radius of a seemingly small compromise, like one infected package, could be much, much larger if it leads to the takeover of critical service accounts or automation tools. It opens up entirely new attack surfaces deep within an organization.
Given this complex picture, the diverse attacks, the challenges, the connection to NHI risk, what are the main takeaways for defense? What does the material emphasize for mitigation?
I think the most crucial takeaway is that just waiting to react after you've been hit isn't good enough anymore. Organizations really need proactive, multi-layered security strategies specifically for the supply chain. For developers, personal vigilance is key. Be mindful, be critical about the dependencies you choose to add to your projects. Don't just blindly trust popularity. And absolutely enable and enforce two-factor authentication on all your accounts related to package management and code hosting, NPM, PyPI, GitHub, GitLab, wherever you operate. As we saw with the GlueStack incident, that lack of 2FA on the maintainer's token was the single point of failure that enabled the whole attack.
So basic hygiene is still fundamental.
Absolutely. And for the security teams within organizations, the focus really needs to shift towards enhanced monitoring and detection capabilities tailored to these threats. That means watching network traffic closely. Are you seeing connections going out to known malicious IPs or those unusual ports like 3306 or 27017? Are you seeing communication patterns that look suspicious? It also means having good endpoint detection and response to EDR tools in place, configured to scan systems for known malware indicators like those specific persistence files or directory structures, Python 3127, or processes exhibiting suspicious behavior associated with these attacks. Robust access controls are vital. The principle of least privilege, giving accounts only the permissions they absolutely need, is more important than ever, and paying much closer attention to credential management, especially for those non-human identities. That means enforcing regular rotation of API keys and secrets, storing them securely, not in code, and having clear processes for managing their entire lifecycle. And finally, regular audits are highlighted as critical. Periodically review the dependencies used in your projects. Scan them for known vulnerabilities. Audit the security state of your build servers and CI/CD pipelines. Treat your software supply chain as a critical asset that needs ongoing protection.
Okay, so bringing this all together, we've really dug into how attackers are actively and cleverly exploiting the trust inherent in the software components we all rely on. They're using sneaky techniques like whitespace obfuscation and path hijacking to hide their malware and make it persistent. And they're deploying a whole range of payloads from powerful arts in full control to destructive wipers to targeted credential stealers. And the impact stretches from individual developer machines potentially right through to production systems and even those critical automated identities.
Yeah, it really serves as a stark reminder, doesn't it? The software we build and use every day rests on this incredibly complex, interconnected web of dependencies, most of it open source. Securing that supply chain isn't just one person's job, it's a shared, ongoing challenge. It demands constant vigilance and proactive security thinking from everyone involved, the maintainers creating these components, the developers integrating them, and the security professionals trying to defend the resulting systems.
Absolutely. And maybe the most provocative thought to leave you, our listener, with is this. Just how deeply reliant have we become on this vast, complex, largely open source ecosystem? We place an enormous amount of implicit trust in it every single time we run NPM install or pip install. How do we, as a global community of creators and users, effectively balance the undeniable benefits, the speed, the innovation, the collaboration that open source enables with the inherent and clearly growing security risks that these kinds of supply chain attacks throw into such sharp relief? Something to ponder. Now, this whole discussion about current cybersecurity threats really underscores the absolute necessity of having robust data protection strategies in place. For secure, ransomware-proof enterprise storage, effective backup and disaster recovery, specialized AI storage, and reliable cloud solutions, we definitely encourage you to learn more about our sponsor, Stonefly. They offer specialized solutions, including things like air-gapped and immutable storage, specifically designed to shield your critical data from exactly these kinds of evolving threats. You can reach out to them at sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo and discuss your needs. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. We hope you found it insightful. We'll be back soon with another exploration into the information that matters.